everyone, and welcome to another episode of Adventures in DevOps. As always, I'm Nell, one of your co-hosts. I'm an engineer previously at Chef, about to be at Mozilla, and fantastic to be here with all of you today. With me, as always, is my co-host, Chuck. Chuck, how's it going?
It's going well. I'm excited. We've set up a whole bunch of these from KubeCon, and I think this is like the last one that's not at a regularly scheduled time. So we're going to get back to normal soon.
Today's podcast is sponsored by UpCloud. Is your website running slow? Supercharge your hosting performance by deploying on the world's fastest cloud infrastructure. UpCloud offers superior cloud servers and advanced scalability, instant backup snapshots, and easy-to-use control panel. Fully featured API and a ton of integration options and managing partners. Pricing starts at only $5 a month with enough performance options to host any website or app, all backed by 24/7 live in-house support. You can get started today with a free trial using promo code DevChatTV at upcloud.com/signup. They'll give you a $25 credit to get you going. Remember, upcloud.com/signup with promo code DevChatTV.
And with us today is our fantastic guest, Brent Schroeder. Brent, how are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing fantastic. I'm glad to be here and excited about our talk.
Awesome. Well, I know the topic we are going to discuss today is the quest for frictionless DevOps, but I'm wondering, before we kick off into that, can you tell us a little bit more about your role at SUSE?
Certainly. So I'm the global CTO for SUSE, and that essentially involves trying to keep an eye out on everything that's going on in the IT industry and how that might affect us, and then helping work on shaping our overall strategy and viewpoint on the topics and the markets that we're planning to participate in.
Sounds great. And I know SUSE has a big focus on open source.
We are 100% open source. All of our products are open source, and we do an full in the clear open source development model.
Oh, that's interesting.
So, none of our development occurs behind the scenes or includes proprietary elements to our releases. So I think that makes us unique and a very compatible and consistent model and view for our customers.
Yeah, it's interesting when you compare it to some of the other flavors of Linux out there. I worked at a university when I was early in my career, and we had SUSE servers, and Red Hat was what we primarily used. And a lot of the Red Hat stuff, you could go and get like Fedora or something, or Red Hat Enterprise Linux. But if you wanted the full on Red Hat experience, you had to pay for it, and a lot of that stuff was closed source. And so it's interesting when you're talking about this that it's all open, and there are a few others too that seem to be mostly open or completely open as well. But yeah, what makes SUSE want to follow that model as opposed to some of the other models where there's some monetization or focus around different aspects of Linux that aren't the open source approach?
I think it goes back to just the original founders and the culture of SUSE, in that was the way we started it, and was really the mantra of open source. And what open source was all about is to be able to collaborate in the open and enable everybody to contribute. And we still monetize on the service model,
right?
But we don't create proprietary extensions, et cetera, to do that. And what that doesn't do, from our customer standpoint, is it doesn't lock our customers into a specific way of doing things. And our customers definitely appreciate that. We hear that loud and clear from them.
Oh, nice.
And how do you think that open source technology fuels a DevOps culture at SUSE, or fuels a DevOps culture in your customers?
Yeah, I think it just in general, if you think about open source and again the philosophy of it, I think DevOps and open source go very well together. It's about collaboration and working together to accomplish a goal. So I think it's the culture that really helps kind of fuel and be a driving force for DevOps. See the vast majority of the companies that I interact with that are kind of going down that DevOps model and implementing it. It often starts with open source groups and open source projects. I think they just go hand in hand together with each other.
And I know SUSE is partnered with the Cloud Native Computing Foundation. Can you tell us a little more about that?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. We work very closely with Cloud Native Computing Foundation as well as many others. And I think those are key elements of the DevOps momentum and making that go forward. So, we have a distribution, beyond Linux. We have a distribution based on multiple Cloud Native Computing Foundation projects, most specifically in the container space. With cryo containers, where our our container as a service platform is comprised of cryo containers and Docker containers, as well as Helm and Kubernetes. And we package that all up in a.
What is a cryo container? I'm curious about that.
So that's the open source community's version. So Docker really got it started back at the beginning of the decade. And then the open source community kind of took that and ran with it and built essentially a runtime that was built by the community and fully open source. So just an alternative to Docker as a container runtime.
Got it.
Interesting.
So we've taken those projects as well as others that we're continuing to work on and across the spectrum of the container ecosystem and Kubernetes ecosystem, to build our container as a service platform and make that available and just continue to mature and advance that. So yes, we're active in the Cloud Native Computing Foundation.
Cool. And I got to ask, I was just looking because I want to put a note about cryo containers in the show notes. How do you spell that? Because I searched for CRYO containers and I got a bunch of things for cryogenics, which I don't think is what we're looking for here.
CRI-O.
Got it. All right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting to me with the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, how it seems like it really is at the forefront of combining open source practices with DevOps practices. We see a lot of DevOps related technologies coming out of them.
Yep.
Yeah. They either create them or they adopt them, right?
Yeah. One thing that kind of expanding it, and it's not in the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, but we're also a member of the CloudFoundry Foundation, which is a PaaS environment that we also have a distribution of in our cloud application platform. And we see the coming together of the CNCF and CloudFoundry, as a real catalyst to take DevOps into to really the next level. And this notion that we teed up as a title of that quest for frictionless DevOps, I think really starts to manifest itself when you bring those two together.
So it sounds like you've kind of got your fingers in a lot of different pies. What's kind of the overarching theme? I mean, you're talking about frictionless DevOps. Is that the overarching theme, or is it a particular outcome that you want for open source DevOps, et cetera, or where are you trying to?
I think the overall what we're trying to do is provide an enterprise class experience or set of capabilities for application delivery. So it's really about companies being able to deliver applications in as an agile and rapid manner as possible. And some of the challenges, I think, is as you look at DevOps and see some of the early on projects, and when I talk to customers, some of the challenges that arise is that it can't be just about dev. That's one of the things containers, right, enabled, and all the excitement in the early part of the last, I guess it's now the last decade since we're in 2020, is that the developers could, as containers came about, developers could rapidly develop new features and functionality and push and release that in a service microservices model. And that sounds fantastic, and developers, love that philosophy. The challenge that we've seen is that as you try to scale a model where developers are just doing that without coordination and collaboration with operations, is the consistency and governance that's necessary at an enterprise shop. Do I have all the security practices in place? Do I have all the scaling rules implemented consistently? Can I govern how much resource is being used? Is the availability applied consistently? Do I know that I've got availability practices in applications that are becoming mission critical applications versus just a light web service? And so how do we bring kind of the ops back to DevOps in this whole space of containers and what containers enables, and be able to take advantage of the value proposition that containers bring, such as the lightweight and the rapidly scale up and down, but still have some consistency in governance. And that's where we see bringing CloudFoundry and the container world together is a great opportunity, because CloudFoundry, with our cloud application platform, operations teams can go into CloudFoundry and put together the policies, define what the policies are for deployment, for scaling rules, for application placement, for dev and test workload placement. And now the developers don't have to go in and write Kubernetes code. All they do is push an application, and based on their roles and access rights and what the application is, that application gets placed with the appropriate scaling rules, with the appropriate security and network settings, all automatically set. So, we think that's kind of really, maybe for the first time, really bringing dev and ops together in that frictionless manner, where the application developers can call on resources, can deploy applications without having to code infrastructure.
Yeah, I definitely see the appeal, because it seems like in a lot of cases, ops cares mostly about security and consistency, and the developers don't want to worry about it. And so if you get that ease of deployment or that ease of management, then everybody kind of gets what they want to some degree.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's exactly the way we see it going. And, as I talk with customers, as mentioning before we started, I spend most of my time on the road. And much of that is with customers. As everybody is experimenting and working with containers. Some have it in production, but the majority of them are still bringing up their initial projects. And as they do that, they start to come across some of these challenges, and their questions are all centered around that: is how do I govern and manage containers? How do I know where a container came from? Can I manage its chain of custody? Can I, as developers and applications teams want to join in, and I go from, one development project and 20 developers to, 15 or 20 projects and hundreds of developers? How do I ensure that it gets done consistently between development teams? And I'm not having to train, every developer on writing Kubernetes scripts, because that's probably one of the hardest skill sets in the industry to find right now, and is highly sought after and fought over. And so, many companies have a challenge hiring those skill sets, but they, have a big team of Java developers or Python developers and want to be able to apply those and make those productive as possible. So being able to take advantage of containers without having to teach everybody Kubernetes, is a huge productivity boost to the organization.
I like that a lot. I'm on the board of a nonprofit called Operation Code, and we made a decision a few years ago to run our organization website in Kubernetes. The reason we did that was it's a very marketable skill set. We are teaching recent military veterans software engineering skills and technology skills. The problem we found is the learning curve with using Kubernetes is so great. Any beginning developer who wanted to contribute to our open source organization website also had to learn Kubernetes, which I think is too much to ask for someone who is a very beginner developer. Now, if they're interested, I'm happy to take them through the ins and outs of Kubernetes, how it works, how you change it, etc. But I think when we're onboarding someone new to the technology world or new to a DevOps culture, etc., it's important to have just some compartmentalization so they can learn one set of technologies, then another, and figure out where they want to specialize.
Yes.
Hey folks, this is Charles Max Wood, and I just launched my book, The Max Coder's Guide to Finding Your Dream Developer Job. It's up on Amazon. We self-published it. I would love your support. If you want to go check it out, you can find it there, The Max Coder's Guide to Finding Your Dream Developer Job. Have a good one. Max out.
Yeah, I think you encountered the same experience that many out there every day are encountering, is how do I bring my teams up to speed? And our philosophy is that not everybody needs to know it. Get a core set of operations and even developers that understand it, so that the developers and the operations team can work together in defining what those policies are, but then codify those policies rather than have teams coding it uniquely by application or writing custom pipelines and then needing to do that not just as one project, but 2 projects and 10 projects and 100 projects. And that's where the scale, really comes to play, is to be able to apply the agility and CI/CD at a very large scale.
So how do you see, you mentioned earlier in the show, we're at a new decade now. How do you see microservices and Kubernetes and SUSE evolving in this new decade?
Yeah, it's going to be an exciting one. It's always hard to predict. It seems like every decade moves faster and farther than the last. I think over the next few years, we're just going to see a rapid growth and maturing. In the Kubernetes and container space, there's still a significant amount of maturing that needs to happen. And I think we'll see that. And it's not just with Kubernetes itself, but it's really about the ecosystem that goes around Kubernetes. It's the networking aspects of it, service mesh coming into play and becoming more integrated into offerings, and the service mesh itself maturing, the security ecosystem, getting fully adopted and wrapped into the container and Kubernetes ecosystem. And then more with storage. Storage still has a ways to go in persistent storage and enabling the easier building of persistent applications. So I think we're just going to see the whole ecosystem mature, where that becomes, if it's not already, I see it on the horizon as that being the predominant containers and CI/CD being the predominant development model out there for the vast majority of applications. And I think virtual machines and the virtual machine ecosystem will be around for a long, long time. And we'll need some coexistence. That'll be another thing that'll happen. Is right now, it's really 2 completely different tool sets that manage, seems odd to call it legacy, but the legacy virtual machine ecosystem, and a different tool set altogether to manage the container ecosystem. And our customers are asking us, can you converge these? Because, I don't want to train my staffs on 2 entirely different tool sets. So looking for some convergence between that. I think we're starting to see that in some of the developments that not only SUSE is doing, but other companies are doing. And so I think we'll see that continue as well.
Yeah, we had some conversations about multi-cloud setups when we talked to Bob Quillen from Oracle. And, it was the same kind of thing, right? It's okay, well, everybody does it a little bit different, but I don't want to have to manage AWS the AWS way and Azure the Azure way. And so it sounds like, some of these other systems, it's like, how do we get this to converge to the point where I don't have to worry about what infrastructure I'm running on? It just works, no matter where I'm running it or what I'm doing with it, or, who really has to think about it. And I like that. And then I like the ideas too of just, making it more approachable and solving some of these issues in some of these areas that we tend to not think about until we run into some of these hiccups.
Yeah. You bring up some good points there that about consistency across a broader ecosystem. I spent much of the 2000s and early part of the teens on this whole notion of hybrid cloud and trying to create hybrid cloud solutions, and really discovered that it was largely an intractable problem, because all of the clouds released their own services with their own interfaces, all their own management tools. All the on-prem technology was doing the exact same thing. Mm-hmm. And so coming up with a way to consistently manage a hybrid ecosystem of cloud and virtualized resources was essentially impossible. What I'm hoping to see I'm seeing on the horizon and hoping that the industry as a whole can continue with, and actually I call upon our customers to hold us accountable, hold the industry accountable for this, is with Kubernetes and containers. I think for the first time in history at this part of the stack, we've got the majority of the industry with a consistent implementation. We've got Kubernetes in Azure and Amazon and Google, and we use it on-prem, and now VMware is using it on-prem. And so from an application orchestration, there's an opportunity for consistency across all of these assets, which is like I said, I think it's unprecedented in the industry. So I'm hoping that continues on forward. We're doing some work, quite a bit of work in being able to manage a hybrid and multi-cloud environment. If we go back to some of those projects, we started a project called Stratos in the CloudFoundry community, and we're continuing to expand Stratos' capabilities. But Stratos is essentially a graphical user interface for managing resources that's completely, it's not tied to CloudFoundry, even though we did it out of the CloudFoundry Foundation. And from that, we can essentially manage any API surfaced endpoint. So we can look at CloudFoundry resources, we can look at Kubernetes resources, essentially anything that can be surfaced in a catalog and presents itself as an API that user interface can manage. So we can look through a catalog, we can deploy the resources, it can scale dynamically, add resources, take away resources, and it's all driven by the user's identity as far as what they see, what catalogs they see. So, with that, we can, a customer that's using that interface in our cloud application platform can manage applications that are deployed across Azure, Amazon, on-prem, IBM Cloud with CloudFoundry, pure Kubernetes applications. And so it's really, like I say, I think some of these standards and the open source, this comes back to how is open source fueling DevOps. All of these are open source projects. And I think it's the open source aspect and the collaboration aspect that really enable that.
Yeah, it's interesting to me too, just from the standpoint that, you're talking about having a graphical user interface for managing this stuff. And I don't remember if you were there, Nell, or not, but we did an interview with the folks from IBM about CUI, which is, it's kind of a graphical / CLI system for managing resources in another way. And it seems like that's where a lot of this is headed, just to kind of pile on, hey, some of this is going to get easier. Some of it's going to get more visual. We're going to be able to, kind of figure out what's going on. We're seeing other tools like this come and solve this same problem. And I'm really kind of excited about that because some of it's a little bit painful.
I think all of us, or at least all of our managers, are looking for that single pane of glass view into all of the infrastructure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Go ahead,
One other
Jeff.
thing that I'm wondering, along the lines of Nell asking, okay, what's coming in the next decade? Some of it's going to be this kind of a thing, right? Where we're going to make what we have easier. We're going to make what we have better. Are we going to see something kind of come up and supplant, the Kubernetes or Docker way of doing things? In the same way that Kubernetes and Docker kind of did that to virtual machines and things like that.
You would never say no in this industry because things come so quickly. But I think for the foreseeable future, particularly those that want to develop applications and build an infrastructure that is durable. And can be counted on for several generations of applications. I think that will be the de facto standard. Now, the one that's kind of coming in there, and I wouldn't say supplanting, I would say complementing, is the functions as a service or serverless, depending upon how you want to refer to it. And I think that will gain traction. I mean, we're all looking at integrating that with our products. But I think it's going to be done in such a way that it complements and is workable in the same ecosystem, in the same management ecosystem, versus being a completely discrete environment. I think our customers are just going to demand that, because saying, okay, that was a great experiment for the 2012 to 2020, but here for 21 to 26, let's try this model. Enterprises aren't going to take that. So while I think there's some great productivity and efficiency gains that are coming in functions as a service, I think we're going to do it in a manner that's more consistent and less disruptive than other technologies.
I very much agree. It's not uncommon to see on Twitter someone saying, well, why would I learn Kubernetes when everything's going to learn service, or everything's going to go to serverless in 5 years? And the answer is, serverless does a lot, but you still, and if I just want to run a function, a one-off or repeated functions, that's fine, but I still need to persist the result of that function somewhere. I need to do something with that function.
Exactly.
So there will be other infrastructure involved in whatever application or technology I'm working on.
Yeah, I think you bring up a great point now with the comment about persistence, in that everything that we do about our lives, our daily lives, about what businesses are about, is about persisting transactions, right? I want my bank account to update properly when I get my paycheck, or when I try and buy something online, I want to pay for my things with my credit, my credit card bill. I don't want to get somebody else's bill. So, while there's many activities and events that don't have to be persistent, can be ephemeral, at the end of the day, most of what happens in our daily lives has to have some aspect of persistence. And so, just a function as a service to carry out something quickly, absolutely. But I think that's where it's a complement to the evolving container ecosystem, as containers get better at persistence and can become that, the system of record, transactional systems.
Yeah, the other thing that I'm seeing, though, is that a lot of serverless runs on that container architecture. And so as the container architecture improves, so does the serverless architecture.
Right. Yeah. And like I say, I think that's another example of how they're going to be complementary and grow together. And we'll just, like I say, hopefully the customers hold us accountable for not, churning their lives any more than we need to.
Have you heard of Atwood's Law? He says that anything that can be built in JavaScript eventually will be built in JavaScript, and that includes mobile apps. You can build awesome mobile apps and Apple TV and other apps with React Native. Come check us out every week as we talk about some of the ins and outs of building mobile apps with JavaScript and with React on React Native Radio. You can find it at reactnativeradio.com.
Something I noticed when we were preparing for the show is there's videos, podcasts, et cetera, that you've done where you've talked about edge to core to cloud. Could you tell us a little more about what that means?
Yeah, absolutely. So what I see as edge to core to cloud, and it actually fits this topic very well, is that each domain grew up in its own world in really an isolated fashion. The core data center obviously has been around for a long time, but as the clouds emerged, clouds having their own tool sets, their own interfaces, their own infrastructure. And then as edge is coming online, seeing specific edge tool sets and edge development kits, et cetera. And my vision and view of this is that we need to create a consistent platform, if you will, from edge to core to cloud. So if I'm writing an application or deploying that application, that I can do that to some degree, to a large degree, independent of where the target is. I can use the tools that the application needs, and I can deploy and manage those wherever it needs to be. So I could do development in the cloud, and then I could push that application to the edge. And when they're running at the edge, I may have some aspects of it sitting at the edge, but it needs to be communicating with aspects that are in the core data center or in the cloud. And it's relatively easy for those applications to interact, for data to move from one location to the other. And so it's all about edge to core to cloud is all about creating a consistent platform and a consistent set of management tools that can manage them wherever the application and the infrastructure resides. And a lot of the work that we're doing with our infrastructure, whether it goes back to SLES or our containers, we just have one code set of an operating system. So if you want to run on an ARM Raspberry Pi on an edge device monitoring industrial equipment, or you want to run a high-performance computing cluster or run an app in the cloud, run SAP mission critical in the cloud, we have one operating system that runs it all and one management tool that can manage all of those regardless of where they are and keep the security synced. So at the platform level, that's what we're doing to try to drive that consistency. And now at the application delivery level, with containers and our cloud application platform and CloudFoundry, we can do that same thing. So we can push an application to wherever it needs to land. Whether you want to push an application to 100 edge locations and make sure that gets deployed consistently, the security and the implementation is consistent across all those locations, we can do that. And that can actually have elements of that application could be simultaneously deployed to reside in Azure or Amazon, and the network configured to connect the two federated worlds together. And so that at the application delivery level is kind of delivering that consistent edge to core to cloud.
I like that a lot. I mean, we often think of the cloud as this big ephemeral thing, but one of the types of data I've dealt with is voter data. And it's different from state to state about where that data needs to reside. And it's very strict rules. And you can even go internationally and you deal with data sovereignty and such. I mean, the idea that I could be in compliance with all of those laws, all of those principles, but still have one view into my application as a whole, that really appeals to me.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's critical in today's kind of business climate and social climate, to your point on where's my data and who can see it and who has access to it.
All right. Well, is there anything else we'd like to chat about before we take this to a close?
I just have one more question, and that is, So, I mean, I remember back in the day when SUSE was essentially, hey, we've got this Linux distribution and all of the things around it. And now we're talking about, the DevOps ecosystem and all of the tools and things that SUSE provides for folks working in the cloud. So is there anything coming from SUSE over the next while that you want to let us know to kind of keep an eye out for? Because it seems like there's this progression that you've gone through. Yep. And what's next?
So what's next for SUSE is many things are on the plate. We're working across the company in our whole portfolio of application delivery and filling that out, and just also on our traditional compute and storage infrastructure and our software-defined storage product. So, I think if somebody were to look back, as you said, what SUSE looked like in the last decade, we don't look like that anymore. And I think if you look forward 3 years, what we will look like at that point, we've got a corporate goal to double in size over a 3-year period, which is extremely aggressive. And the whole organization is excited about how we're going about that and what's in front of us. So when we come back and do this in a couple of years and look back, it'll look like a very different company once again. But we absolutely are 100% in on this application delivery and cloud native computing and bringing that to the masses and being a competitive player in that space.
Nice.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Brent, for joining us. Fantastic
Absolutely.
to have you on the show. And let's go ahead and move on to picks. Picks are something we do every show where we each highlight a couple of things we found useful, technical or non-technical, throughout our week or throughout our lives. I'll go ahead and start. And my pick, as soon as I saw who we were interviewing on the show or where you were from SUSE, I knew I had to pick the soundtrack to SUSICLE the musical, which is fantastic. It's very charming. It's from, I think, the late 1990s is when it premiered. But if you like musicals, even if you don't like musicals, if you like Dr. Seuss, if you don't like Dr. Seuss, very whimsical, very touching, highly recommend it. And that's my only pick for today. Chuck, what about you?
Man, SUSICLE the musical. What a great show.
I will have to look that up. So I'm not familiar with it.
Yeah, well worth it if you get a chance to go see it. I think I've seen it a couple of times at kind of the community theater level, but it's a lot of fun. I'm trying to think what I want to pick because I wasn't quite. We've done 3 of these this week, and I don't want to repeat myself. One pick that I have, and this is something that I've always wanted, but I am not going to be getting anytime soon, is a whisper room. So if you're not familiar with it, it's basically a sound isolation booth. And the reason is because I have 5 kids that when they're at home, getting a quiet space to record a podcast is hard. And my microphone filters enough of it out to where it's not a major problem. But I had to kind of take it up to another level because I scheduled some time to record an audiobook, and I'm going to be submitting that to Audible, and they won't accept it if it has, even the kind of faint, artifacts of my kids screaming. And usually the culprit's my 14-year-old, I'll admit. So, it's just something that I've always kind of wanted. So I've been looking at some other options for soundproofing, and it turns out that there are really a lot of great options out there. So if you want to go and look some of them up, you can. One of them is people tend to put rock wool into their walls. So I'm picking whisper rooms. I'm also picking rock wool, which is just something you can go get at the hardware store. And then there's also the sound foam that eliminates echo. And so you can get some of that too. And then finally, I'm also looking at getting some rigid foam that I can put into my window. So I'll just cut it out the shape of my window and just slide it in there because it's right in front of me. Because that was the other problem was I waited until my kids were at school and then somebody was out there banging on their car or something. I don't know what it was, but the wham, wham, wham during the audiobooks was just not a go. So anyway, those are some soundproofing options that I've been looking at. And I guess one last pick, and this is something that I'm just starting now, is I'm starting a new podcast called MVP. For marketing via podcasts. I I get a lot of questions from our sponsors about how to sponsor a podcast. And yeah, I want to make sure that, those questions get answered. So yeah, I've been looking at some options for just answering some of those questions. And it also gives me something to talk about with sponsors when I email them and say, hey, are you interested in supporting the shows? So anyway, so those are my picks.
Awesome. And your picks made me think a little bit of that video that went around a few years ago of the dad who was being interviewed on the BBC live about North Korea, and his kids come wandering into the room making a ton of noise.
Yeah, you see his wife kind of sneak in and kind of crawl in behind him and fish the kids out.
Yeah, the best thing is the look of horror that comes over his face. Well, there's absolutely nothing he can do.
Yeah, and then there's a parody video that you should also check out. That it's this lady, and it's like, well, if a woman had been on the show, and she like pulls dinner out of the oven and disarms a bomb and a bunch of stuff. Anyway, it was pretty funny. So yeah,
awesome. Well, Brent, how about you? What are your picks?
Yeah, my pick of the week, or maybe the month, is Lewis Pugh. I don't know if you guys know of Lewis. He's the United Nations patron of the ocean. So he's a well-known endurance athlete that has done, that's all about climate change and what's going on with the oceans. And we recently had him speak at an internal SUSE event. And I'll tell you, he's probably one of the most inspiring individuals I've ever had the opportunity to listen to. And he's got a couple of books out. One of them is Achieving the Impossible, which is a great read. So if you've not heard of Lewis, definitely look him up. His first notable event that he did was he was the one that swam across the North Pole to bring awareness to climate change and the melting of what's happening with the oceans and so forth. So, he told us the story of preparing for that and actually doing it. And it's just, we think we have challenges in our lives or are taking on hard tasks. That's hearing him tell that story is absolutely amazing and makes you believe that nothing is impossible. So it's a great read and an amazing individual to follow.
I will definitely have to check that out. I'm glad he didn't get eaten by a polar bear.
Yeah, I wanted to make a joke about Santa living on a houseboat or something.
Yeah, that's right. Right now, that's where Santa would have to be living for sure. And he's got a swim coming up in about 2 weeks in Antarctica. So it's
that just
similar.
Sounds so cold, so miserable.
Challenge. Well, with the salt water, so the interesting aspect that, we hate taking cold showers. The temperature of salt water is like minus 1.7 C. When it's at it can get that cold before it freezes. Oh, okay. So that was essentially the temperature of the water that he swam a kilometer in on the North Pole.
Dang. Yeah, that's like what, 27, 28 degrees.
27, 28 degrees.
Mm-hmm. My wetsuit would be so thick that I would just put a motor on the back and just float along. But yeah, that's amazing. I have to check that out for sure.
All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Brent, great to have you on the show. Thank you so much for being with us today. And have a wonderful week, everyone, when you're hearing this. And we will talk to you soon. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bandwidth for this segment is provided by CacheFly, the world's fastest CDN. Deliver your content fast with CacheFly. Visit CACHEFLY.com to learn more.